A quiet morning on June 10th, 1991, an 11-year-old in a small town near Lake Tahoe started walking toward her school bus stop. She never got there. For the next 18 years, 4 months and 16 days, Jaycee Dugard would not be seen again by anyone who loved her. What happened to her during those years is one of the most disturbing captivity cases in American history. This is the story of how Jaycee Dugard disappeared in plain sight and how a chance encounter on a college campus 18 years later finally brought her home. Jaycee Lee Dugard was born on May 3rd, 1980. She grew up mostly around Los Angeles, but in September of 1990, her family made a decision a lot of parents make. They moved somewhere quieter, somewhere that felt safer for kids. They settled in Myers, a small rural community just south of South Lake Tahoe, California. Jaycee lived with her mother, Terry, her stepfather, Carl Probin, and her baby half-sister, Shayna, who'd been born the year before. By all accounts, Jaycee was a normal fifth grader. She was looking forward to a school field trip. She had a favorite color, pink, a detail that would matter later in a way nobody could have predicted. None of them knew that less than 2 miles away, an even more dangerous man was already living freely in the world. Philip Craig Garrido was born in 1951. By 1991, he already had a documented history of extreme violence. In 1976, he had kidnapped a woman named Catherine Katie Calloway Hall, snatched her off the street, drove her to a storage unit, and raped her. He was caught, convicted in both federal and Nevada state court, and sentenced to what should have been a very long time behind bars. Instead, he served roughly 11 years. He was released on federal parole in January of 1988. The California Inspector General would later call that early release decision, quote, inexplicable. At the time, though, nobody made that connection because nobody yet knew Philip Garrido's name had anything to do with Jaycee Dugard. June 10th, 1991. Early morning. Jaycee is walking her usual route to the school bus stop. Her stepfather, Carl, is at the top of the driveway, watching her go. The kind of small, routine moment parents don't think twice about. Then, a car appears. Witnesses, and there were several, would later describe seeing a man and a woman in the vehicle. According to court testimony given years afterward, it was Nancy Garrido, Philip's wife, who physically grabbed Jaycee. Philip was behind the wheel. Investigators would later learn he'd used a stun gun to subdue her and keep her from fighting back. Carl Probin saw it happen. He got on a bicycle and chased the car down the road. He lost it. In minutes, an 11-year-old girl had vanished from a quiet street in a small town, grabbed by 2 people driving toward a home more than 160 miles away in Antioch, California. Neither Philip nor Nancy Garrido would set foot in a courtroom for this crime for another 20 years. What followed was one of the largest missing child searches Northern California had seen. Local and national media picked up the story within hours. Search dogs combed the area. Volunteers canvassed neighborhoods. Within weeks, tens of thousands of flyers with Jaycee's photo were mailed to businesses across the country. Jaycee's mother, Terry, founded a group called Jaycee's Hope to coordinate fundraising and search efforts. The town blanketed itself in pink ribbons, Jaycee's favorite color, as a quiet, constant reminder that she wasn't forgotten. And despite all of it, despite witnesses, despite a massive law enforcement response, despite FBI involvement, investigators had almost nothing to go on. No license plate, no solid suspect description, no connection yet to a convicted rapist and kidnapper living a 2-hour drive away. here's where the story gets harder to sit with. Less than a year after the abduction, an anonymous man called the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department. He said he'd seen a girl at a gas station just a couple of miles from the Garrido property, staring intently at a missing child poster of herself. He said she left in a large yellow van. By the time deputies arrived, the girl, the caller, and the van were gone. Years later, when police finally searched the Garrido property, they found an old yellow van matching that exact description. The call was never followed up to a resolution. The caller was never identified. That lead simply stopped. It's one of the most haunting what-ifs in the entire case, because it means that within a year of the kidnapping, someone in the community may have actually seen Jaycee Dugard, and the system built to protect children like her didn't catch it. Investigators would later reconstruct what had been happening, hidden less than a 2-hour drive from where Jaycee's family kept searching. Philip and Nancy Garrido had taken her to their property in Antioch and held her in a concealed compound behind their house, sheds and tents tucked out of sight in the backyard, with soundproofing investigators would later describe as resembling a makeshift recording studio. For the next 18 years, Jaycee lived almost entirely within that hidden space. We're not going to describe in detail what was done to her there. What matters for understanding the case is this. Over the years of her captivity, Jaycee gave birth to 2 daughters, both fathered by Philip Garrido. Both girls grew up inside that same concealed compound, never having attended a day of school, never having been seen by the outside world. And this is the part of the story that tends to shock people most. Philip Garrido was not some recluse hiding from the system. He was inside it. He was a registered sex offender. He was on parole. He had a parole officer whose entire job was to check on him. Between 1999 and 2009, California parole agents visited the Garrido property roughly 60 times. A state review conducted after Jaycee's rescue found that Garrido had been properly and adequately supervised during just 12 of the 123 months he spent under state parole jurisdiction. That's a documented failure rate of about 90%. Some of the specific missed opportunities are almost unbelievable in hindsight. In 2006, a neighbor told sheriff's deputies that a registered sex offender nearby appeared to be living with small children. The report didn't lead anywhere. In June of 2008, a parole agent actually saw one of the young girls on the property during a visit. Garrido told him she was his brother's daughter. The agent didn't check. Garrido's brother didn't have a daughter. There was even physical evidence hiding in plain sight. Utility wires visibly running from the main house out toward the concealed compound. Wires that a later state investigation flagged as something any attentive agent should have questioned. Nobody did. For nearly 2 decades, the system meant to catch exactly this kind of danger walked past it. Again and again. The case didn't break because of a forensic breakthrough. It didn't break because of a tip that finally got followed up. It broke almost by accident. In late August 2009, Philip Garrido showed up on the campus of UC Berkeley with 2 young girls in tow, hoping to get permission to hold a religious event there. He'd become, by this point, deeply fixated on his own invented religious ideas, something he talked about at length and, oddly, openly. Something about the visit struck campus police as off. Maybe it was Garrido's behavior. Maybe it was the girls, who seemed detached from the world in a way that raised flags. Whatever it was, campus officers ran a background check. It came back immediately. Registered sex offender, parolee, prior kidnapping and rape conviction. And here's the detail that made the whole case unravel. Garrido's own parole officer had no idea he had children. 2 days later, on August 26, 2009, Garrido's parole officer, Edward Santos Jr., ordered him to bring the two girls to a parole office in Concord, California for questioning. Garrido showed up with his wife, the two girls, and a third woman. That third woman told investigators her name was Alyssa, that she was from Minnesota, and that she was hiding from an abusive husband. For a while, she protected Garrido. She told authorities he was a good man. Investigators didn't buy it. Something wasn't adding up, and they kept pressing. Eventually, Philip Garrido himself admitted to the 1991 kidnapping, and the woman who called herself Alyssa finally told them who she really was. 18 years, 4 months, and 16 days after she vanished on her way to a school bus, Jaycee Dugard was free. Police searched the Garrido property extensively, along with a neighboring property and a business connected to Garrido's printing work, checking for any link to other unsolved cases. None were found. In November 2009, California's Office of the Inspector General released a scathing report on the parole failures, the 90% supervision failure rate, the missed home visit red flags, all of it laid out in official detail. The state would go on to reach a $20 million civil settlement with Dugard over those failures. Criminally, the case never went to trial. On April 28, 2011, both Philip and Nancy Garrido pleaded guilty. Philip Garrido pleaded guilty to kidnapping and multiple counts of sexual assault, including counts tied to video recordings he'd made. He waived his right to appeal as well. Nancy Garrido pleaded guilty to kidnapping and rape by force, with her plea deliberately made contingent on her husband's guilty plea. She waived her right to appeal as well. The deal was structured for one specific reason: to spare Jaycee and her 2 daughters from having to testify in open court. At sentencing, Judge Douglas Feimister didn't hold back. He called Philip Garrido the, quote, poster child of a sexual predator, and told him he had turned another human being into, quote, property, to be used by you at your whim. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life, the maximum possible under 1991 sentencing law. Nancy Garrido was sentenced to 36 years to life. Jaycee didn't attend the sentencing. Instead, her mother read a statement Jaycee had written. In it, she told Philip Garrido directly that he no longer mattered to her, that she refused to spend one more second of her life in his presence. Neither Garrido has been released. Neither ever will be. In the years since, Jaycee Dugard has spoken about her recovery in her own words. In 2011, she published a memoir, A Stolen Life, written in part as therapy, and in her own description, to help other survivors of abuse. She's talked about beginning animal-assisted therapy with horses alongside her mother and sister. She founded a foundation focused on family reunification and trauma recovery for survivors of similar crimes. But maybe the most important legacy of this case isn't Jaycee's recovery, remarkable as it is. It's the uncomfortable questions it forced California, and honestly the whole country, to sit with. How does a convicted, violent sex offender get 60 home visits from parole officers over 10 years and still keep 2 children and their mother hidden the entire time? How does a documented sighting, an anonymous tip, and a matching van in 1992 just disappear into a filing cabinet? There's no single satisfying answer. What the Inspector General's report ultimately found wasn't one dramatic failure. It was a slow accumulation of small ones. A wrong risk classification, a rushed home visit, a story taken at face value that a 5-minute phone call could have disproven. Jaycee Dugard survived 18 years of captivity.
through, by every account, her own extraordinary resilience. Not because the systems built to find her worked. They didn't. She survived in spite of them. Jaycee Dugard was 11 years old when she disappeared, on a walk to her school bus stop that she never finished. She came home at 29.